I think of disabilities as like a rainbow, right? Um, we have the typical colors of the rainbow that we see. But what if a disability is just a different color of the rainbow? And it's beautiful in its own right. And when
Yeah.
you add that
That
to the
is
rainbow, it
awesome.
enhances it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I think of my children. And that's how I think of their peers in class. And that's how I think of disabilities in general, because it is. There is
Yeah.
beauty. There is beauty in what people think is broken.
Hmm.
Hey guys, welcome back.
Yeah, we're glad to have you here on another episode in the middle of winter. We're staying warm inside. And Deonna, introduce everybody to our special guest this week.
Hey Cassie.
Hey, Dionna.
Hey.
So Cassie's joining us today because she is the mother of somebody with a disability. And I won't spoil it. We'll let Cassie introduce herself
Okay.
and tell us a little bit about yourself and your children and
Sure.
what makes them unique.
Oh boy, I could be here all day for that one. So, yes, my name is Cassie. I am actually just met you guys a few weeks ago, and you guys are amazing.
Through a mutual friend. Well,
mutual
not my mutual
friend.
friend,
Yes.
but
You
Ours.
guys are amazing. I'm so inspired by your story, and just your family and all your support is really touching.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you should be very proud of how far you've come. You really should. And I hope you are. I'm sure you are. So again, I'm Cassie, and I'm here because I am actually mom to not one, but two somebodies with disabilities. So both of my sons have different disabilities, but very different, but some overlap of some of the key kind of struggles and uniqueness that they might have. My older son has autism, very high functioning. Sometimes it's hard to spot. And then other times you're like, oh, yep, there it is. There, it's definitely there.
yeah, my younger brother Eric, for the longest time,
Mhm.
when he was here in New York, was diagnosed with like ADHD and OCD.
Mhm.
And then when they went to Pennsylvania and saw another doctor, they saw the doctor was like, no, he's on the spectrum in what used to be called Asperger's,
Mhm.
a very mild case of that. And so when you say high functioning, it kind of reminds me a little bit of my brother Eric.
Mhm. I think a lot of your people who we do call high functioning would have been classified as Asperger's prior. And I know there's kind of a huge debate in the disability field. Well, first of all, what does that actually mean? And second of all, I think that people who had that diagnosis feel like something was maybe taken away from them a little bit. It kind of set them apart from, well, like, I don't have autism. It's different. Um,
Mhm.
and, then you have people on the other side of that spectrum, so to speak, who are saying, well, it's all just one continuous spectrum of very low functioning. So as you were saying earlier, nonverbal to so high functioning where like you're almost like a savant or something, but you have some social isms,
Yeah.
you're a little different socially or don't pick up on facial expressions, body language, things like that. That's more like my son. He
Very
has
cool.
very, very unique interests as well,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
comes with it, really.
Yeah.
It kind of comes with
I
it.
remember as a kid, my younger brother Eric, he would hyper focus
Yeah.
on certain things. So there was a video game called Dynasty Warriors, and it was about China in the feudal ages.
Mm.
And so he learned everything that anybody could ever want to know about the history of China. And then it transitioned from that into baseball. So at one point he could tell you everything about every baseball team and player that existed.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I love it.
And so when you say like hyperfixating on something, that would just remind me of that.
Yes.
How
So,
old is your kids?
oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
So my oldest son is 8. My younger
Okay.
son is 5.
Okay.
He's going to be 6 soon.
Kids.
Kids, like,
Yeah.
yes, little kids. Yet it feels like I've been doing this forever. Yeah, so they're like very different, but then very much the same. Their interests somehow they have a lot of the same interests, and that's great for me because I'm like, oh, we don't have to buy like all these, toys that he likes, and then he's got his like. They just really mesh well in some ways.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of that also comes from being siblings too. Like you
Yes.
pick up your interests from your siblings.
Hopefully so. Yeah. I think maybe like different uh, gender children, sometimes that might be different, like
Yeah.
a brother and a sister. I don't know. You have a brother. How was that for you? Were you
Oh,
pick
they're
up on all the
complete
same? See what I'm
opposites.
saying?
They
Yeah.
have the same mannerisms though, and that is remember when it was one of our subscriber exclusive episodes, but there was a
No.
little YouTube teaser where she like belched just and she was just we were on the podcast and she's just like "Bleh. Oh oops. But her and her brother both just manners of barn children. I don't know.
But
But different interests.
at the house versus like out of the house.
Oh yeah, no. Home is different
No.
than
I think that's true.
Out of
restaurant
like
or
out
something.
in public.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I hear you there.
Yeah, my older brother is here, but he is sick.
Joe, she called you a girl again.
Sorry.
Her aphasia has made her call so many people girls since we've started doing this.
Sorry.
No, I didn't even pick up on it. It's good.
He is sick right now, and he
Oh.
is in his room right now.
I hope he feels better.
Thank you.
That's rough. There's a lot going around right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not COVID, because that would make 3 times in a row.
Oh, geez.
Versus I didn't get it yet.
How did you dodge that?
Her and her grandmother.
I mean, good for you. You were like one of the only people in America who hasn't like gotten COVID yet.
Oh man. But yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah.
One of the things that we want to do with this podcast is not just focus on ourselves, because we recognize there are so many disabilities and people that interact with people who have disabilities, whether it be family, professional, and we want to create a community of disability. And we actually, our last guest on the podcast, his name was Tim Sutton, and he coined the term differability.
I like that.
So we'll probably use that a lot more often. Thank you so much, Tim. I think that's the perfect term. And he says it's a differability because everybody has an ability.
Yes.
It's just different.
And, also I have a friend who likes to use the term differently abled.
Differently
So
abled. I heard
abled
that
being in
before.
all caps, right?
Yep.
And I love that because the focus is not on what a person can't do. It's on what they can do.
Exactly.
And if we focus on what people can't do, we're going to miss out on so much that they have to offer, right?
Absolutely.
And for, there are studies out there, a book that I'm actually reading right now, saying that for every label we have for somebody, right, whether it's a disability, mental illness, anything like that, really it comes with a positive or some kind of extraordinary ability.
Yeah.
But people don't focus on that. We focus on how people are different, right? And we think, oh, different is bad.
And that's
Different is
really
not
ingrained.
bad.
It's really ingrained in our culture. In a lot of cultures throughout the world. We had a commenter say that he was from the Middle East region, and they just kill people if they're disabilities. They just kill them.
Oh, my heart.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
I know.
And it's really ingrained as like something's wrong. And yes, it's true that you are not normal like other people. You're still a human being with thoughts and emotions and in one unique perspective that, I don't have knowing Deonna, but Deonna's family has, is they got to see her before her disability and after her disability.
Yeah.
And so it really drives that point home that you're the same person.
Just maybe unable to access some of those things for a time, right? And then you were able to a lot with all of the intense therapies and whatnot that you had.
After my stroke, I was mute, and I know what I wanted to say everything in my head, but not speak it.
Wow.
And that's a really fascinating part about brain injury, but disability in general, because most disabilities have some function of brain and neurons and neurological development. And so it's interesting to see in speech, for one example where you and I might think of speech, it's just the brain, you have the thought and it comes out, but they're two different pathways where you can
Mhm.
think the thing, but
Mhm.
not say it.
You're thinking like expressive and receptive
Yeah.
language, right?
Yes.
Big words that I
So,
don't know.
oh, okay.
Well, no, I know, but I
I
don't
do.
say.
You would know. That's a big part of aphasia.
Exactly.
And you know what? With my kids, what's the term you just used? Differability.
Differability, yep.
I'm going to use that.
It's just
It
flows.
flows
I
and
like
it's
I
the
know.
other example that you gave, the other term, differently
differently
abled,
abled.
but
Yeah,
differability just
differability,
flows.
its own word,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Thank you, Tim, for
Yes.
that word.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Because now we can all use it.
And spread it. Yeah.
So with them, a lot of that has been language, right? Speech and language. So they get PT, they get OT, they get speech. My older son gets an autism specialist. They have a
Do
lot
you
of support.
do you have the kids going to school with um let's see that again. Um having the OT, PT, and speech in school?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's provided in school by their IEPs.
Yep.
Yeah, you're very familiar with
I
that.
had
In IEP.
those in high
Mhm.
school too.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So many acronyms that just float out there. IEP, Individualized Education Program or
Yes.
Plan. Yes.
I
So
had that.
you had that. You're very familiar. I'm preaching to the
Mhm.
I
crowd
had
here.
one of those too for a little while.
Did
I
you
had
really?
speech issues. Myself and my younger brother Eric actually. I couldn't pronounce. I want to say it was T's correctly.
Mm.
So I had an IEP for a while. And actually, um, I had, and I still can't. I can't spell. My brain can't form those pathways to spell correctly.
Hmm.
So I rely on spell check like 90% of the
Thank God
time.
we live when we do.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
definitely.
and I actually was, until I had switched school districts, an IEP because of my spelling. They were like, I remember going to a counselor and we would practice like spelling and trying to form those pathways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just never took.
And sometimes it does,
Yeah.
and sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, we just have to learn to accept ourselves and
Mhm.
accept other people where we're at, right?
Yep.
Another thing that I think the greater community could do some
Yeah.
work on, so to speak.
Absolutely.
But with the language, the speech
Mhm.
and the language, they still struggle somewhat, but really historically a lot of that pragmatic language, right? So that functional, if you will, speech. That's kind of how I think of it. Could I give you an exact definition of pragmatic language? No. My son could memorize it and he could tell you like that.
Yeah.
Not that he'd know what it means, but he could memorize it.
Yeah.
So, like who, where, what, when, why, how, all those questions. If you ask my younger son a question, likelihood is going to be you ask, what is that? He may say completely one of those other words. He'll give you an unrelated response sometimes, or he'll give you a response that like, oh, he thought I was asking how instead of what, right?
Mhm.
And so again, it's like, how is his brain receiving the language, right? It could be receiving it fine, who knows? But then his expressive language is like, you have to kind of pick through sometimes and see what he really means. My
Mhm.
older son, he didn't speak sentences till he was like 4 years old.
Hmm.
And then, it came a little more rapidly, but everybody's brain
Different.
is different and develops at a different time.
Exactly.
And I think one of the biggest things we can do as parents of kids with differability is to just try to really hard to understand where they are, and advocate for what they need, because
Mhm.
the school district or early intervention or any of these programs, they're not necessarily going to just hand you what your kids need. You have to explain for people what is going on, give examples, and if you feel like your child isn't getting the supports they need, you have to advocate.
Yeah.
And I think that's been huge. I think another thing that's really hard for us as parents of kids who are maybe not neurotypical is fighting kind of that stigma or even shame. I'm just going to be real. Um, Feeling like the world looks at your kids like, oh, something's wrong with them. When really, is there something wrong? No, there's nothing wrong with them. Do they function differently? Do they function in a way that maybe isn't as skilled as you and I? No. But I think a huge part of what I've come to learn is that they're not broken,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
They're not broken. And you're not
yeah.
broken,
No.
right?
Hey, everybody. We wanted to tell you about our bonus episodes.
That's right. And you can find these episodes in 3 places. The first is going to be Apple Podcasts. The second is going to be our podcast hosting platform, Red Circle. You can find that on our website, deonnazaparo.com. And the third and final place is Patreon. Our Patreon is where we have a lot more bonus content, including newsletters, Q&As, and much, much more. So make sure that you go check them all out. But our audio-only section on Apple Podcast and Red Circle is available at a low price of $4.99 a month or $54 a year. And on Apple Podcasts, you can get a 7-day free trial, so you'll know if it's something that's worth it to you.
We are officially calling it a Stroke of Luck Plus.
That's right. We hope to see you over there, and we hope you enjoy the content.
Back to the show.
That transitions nicely into kind of what I wanted to talk about today, and that is being a parent of somebody with a disability, and specifically what is it called? Spectrum disorder officially now?
Autism spectrum disorder,
Autism
ASD.
spectrum disorder.
Mhm.
And I heard you kind of transitioning into it, so we'll formally let our audience know.
Mm.
You said that one of the things that you had to come to realize is there's no shame
Mm.
in having children with a disability.
Mhm.
Can you talk to us maybe about what that was like
Oh.
first, figuring out that you were the mother of children with disabilities and how you came to overcome that?
Absolutely. So for my older son, I started to realize around 17 months that something was different. Something was a little off compared to, his cousins, some of my friends' children. And I just knew in my gut. I don't know how I knew, but I knew. Um, and, he had some testing and, they picked up other things like ADHD and whatnot. But, he has autism, high functioning. And for him, I think it was a little more clear cut, right? There's things that you notice, like, sure, the nonverbal piece, right? Or maybe hyperfixating. Like, for example, his brain is amazing. When he was 15 months old, by 15 months old, he had this fascination with the alphabet. So we had all these puzzles, and we would make the ABCs is all he wanted to do. So we'd take his little Hot Wheels cars and we'd line them up and make, here's A, here's C.
Mhm.
But he knew the alphabet.
But he was not verbal.
But he was not verbal fully. He could
That
say
is so
the letters, and that's
interesting.
it. Could he use, could he really respond to you other than nodding yes or no? Mm-mm. But he knew it. And then by 17 or 18 months, this is part of me thinking something's a little different here.
Mhm.
Cool, neat, but different. He could do his ABCs with his puzzle, not only backwards and be accurate, but also upside down and backwards. The way that his brain works, I was like, I feel dumb. But it's amazing.
Seriously.
Upside down and backwards, uppercase and lowercase.
That is so
And that's-
odd.
And that's one thing that, like, when you say, I had to get over the fact that I felt shame and that there's
Mhm.
nothing to be ashamed of,
Mhm.
especially with autism spectrum disorder, it's been proven that they're smarter
Oh,
than most people. And so when I hear people put somebody with that type of a disability down,
yeah.
I'm like,
Like, do you even know?
they clearly
Mhm.
are uneducated, but in Tim said this when we had him on the show. If our entire country was run by people with autism, we probably would be living on the moon by now.
I love it. It's so
Because
true.
they really are so smart.
And I think it speaks, I think anywhere on the spectrum, there's definitely a level of intelligence there that we won't fully understand, right? Even if a person is nonverbal, we just don't know because we're not hearing it come out, but certainly it's in there. That's what I believe. But yeah, the higher functioning individuals, it's almost like their brains use that portion of what would have been used for the social skills, not to stereotype. This is my own experience with my son. The social skills, the nonverbal cues, some of that pragmatic language, those things that a lot of people take for granted. It's almost like it rewires or reroutes it to that other part of the brain. Neuroplasticity.
Yes.
Awesome. Aha. I heard that. I don't know how, but
you're learning to speak aphasia. That's how you.
I used to work with people with aphasia.
Okay, well then you're well versed.
Yeah, one of my first social work stints, if you will, was at an aphasia clinic. I loved it.
Where?
Nazareth College. Yeah.
Okay. I went to Nazareth.
I do squirrel. I follow bunny trails and squirrels.
Couple of semesters.
You went to Nazareth? Okay.
After my stroke. Yeah.
That's so ironic. What year was that?
Oh, 2013 to 15?
Okay, a little bit after. Darn, we just barely missed each other.
I know.
Interesting.
That is so crazy.
So I follow you.
Yeah.
I get where you're going.
Yeah.
You just do you. You just do you. What were you saying before that? See?
Oh, we were just talking about how
bunnies.
How unlocked people with autism spectrum disorder, how unlocked their brains are, and they get there by sacrificing other parts of their brain.
I totally see that. I agree with you. There are plenty of studies that show that. Yet, as a parent and maybe even a person with those different abilities, I think there is still shame.
Yeah.
Because people want to feel like they belong.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as a parent, you want your children to fit in, but they're not always going to fit in. And what happens when you start to notice that other children aren't necessarily playing with your child? What happens when you notice your child gravitates to maybe a little bit younger kids because socially that's where they're at, maybe just a couple years younger? And that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
Right?
I have friends that are 20, 21.
I wish I was still 20 or 21.
Me too. But why do we shame little kids when they're doing that?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And if that's where they're comfortable and that's where they're at, let them learn.
Yeah.
Let them learn, and they may catch up, they may not. And if they don't, okay.
I had a 5th year of high school too.
You did?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How did you feel doing that?
I felt like I was older than the kids in my class.
Don't lie, Deonna. You were walking around bullying them. Listen, I'm older than you. Give me your lunch money.
No. But yeah, I mean, I had like half a day going to high school, and then I had one class at my college.
So it was like a split day.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But I graduated in my class, but the following year I went back to school for...
You had to finish up.
Yeah.
It's nice that you got to graduate with your peers, though.
Yeah.
Nice they let you do that.
Yeah. We have a long way to come as far as school districts, too.
We do.
Catching up.
I'm really grateful for where my sons are. They are one of the best school districts for special needs.
And that's what I've heard is that they really do a good job.
They do.
Yeah.
You still have to advocate, of course.
Absolutely.
You know, at the end of the day, things come down to funding, right?
Well,
Like,
Funding.
and
Yeah.
if you
Mhm.
look at the education system in our country too, it's like a factory. It really is. You're pushing kids through. It's just like,
Yeah.
it's the nature of education. And I experienced this a little bit when I worked with the deaf community at RIT, is that a lot of the deaf community would be many years behind in school
mm,
because the tendency was, if you didn't have somebody advocating for you and you weren't at a school for the deaf, um, they would just pass you on to the next grade. Next
Mhm.
person's problem, next person's
mm,
problem. And it's not just one school, it's an institutionalized problem.
wow.
But the resources are there if you're advocated for. If you have parents that,
hmm
in being in a deaf community, if you have parents that learn sign language and teach sign language. We actually had deaf students at RIT didn't even learn sign language because nobody wanted to teach them.
Oh,
And so it's just wild. And then on the other hand, where people are advocated for, where they go to schools that have programs for that, either schools for the deaf or schools with ASL um, services, they grow up to feel a part of a community. And deaf culture is an entire community in and of itself,
hmm
where they have a different language, they have different cultural norms. And so that's just one example of the power of advocating.
we have a lot of work to do kind of everywhere, really.
Really do,
Mhm.
yeah.
Right. And I think another struggle, with any school district, just the nature of like back to IEPs, right?
Mhm.
Um, they're so academically driven. That's how they're wired to be. But not all of your students' main struggles are academic,
Mhm.
Mhm.
right? And some of those other struggles heavily influence how well they're going to do in academics.
Mhm.
So I think it's sometimes a struggle to look beyond just the academics and to kind of justify, okay, we still need the supports and services going because that's what's really driving the success in the
Mhm.
academics, right?
Mhm.
And if you don't have a parent or somebody who's advocating for you as one of those students, it's easy to fall through the cracks.
Yeah. Yeah. And it shouldn't be like that,
I agree.
because, especially as the years go on, it's really hard to survive in this world. And, as a parent, you're doing all that you can to provide for your family, and it's not intentional, but I'm sure there are many cases where it's like your kids' problems in school don't become apparent because there's so much going on, and there should be a system in the school that picks up on that, and their first response isn't to fail them or to send them back or to call your kid has a problem. It should
hmm
be more of a proactive approach.
Mhm.
And that's a good word because quite often it's not a proactive approach. It's a reactive approach. And I understand some of that
Mhm.
because you have to have the data and in the testing to be able to justify, okay, this child needs extra support. But sometimes it's a little too reactive where it
Mhm.
takes months and months and months to get something in place and then your
Mhm.
child is even more, behind.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
totally agree.
Yeah, and let's
Mhm.
face it, schools are part of the government, and government and efficiency are words that do not go together. Government efficiency and I'm from the government, I'm here to help. Two things that just they don't go together.
I love it. Tell me how you really feel.
Yeah. Um
So, what are your worries and
Mm.
for the
Outcomes.
future with you
Yeah.
and your children?
Oh boy. I mean, there's a lot there.
It's a lot to
I,
unpack.
I think,
Mhm.
yeah. And as the more you get to know me, you'll realize that I do a lot of bunny trails too. And like, oh, look, a shiny thing or a squirrel. So I maybe we'll go back a little bit into
Mhm.
your last question, if that's okay,
Absolutely.
which was talking about like how did I realize maybe they were a little different and what was going on, and then the stigma, the shame,
Yeah.
right? So, um, for my younger son, he was born 8 weeks early. He was a NICU baby. thank God for only like a month. That was like, they were like, we
Wow.
don't even know how.
Wow.
And I was like, I know how, but that's me. I'm definitely a person of faith. And I know that for me, like that
Me
was a
too.
miracle.
Yeah.
They said he was a miracle baby, and I totally believe it. So for him, it was different. Like he didn't have these major things that stood out, like my older son. Like,
Deficits.
yeah, he was just, I said before we started rolling, global developmental delays. So all domains of development, whether it be speech, physical, cognitive, anything like that, was moderately to severely delayed. And, still is in some ways. He's making some great progress. But, so for example, he couldn't hold his head up at 5 months old. I have pictures of his first birthday. I had to prop him up and like stage it. He couldn't sit up on his own
Wow.
till he was 13 months old.
Oh, wow.
So a month later, he finally had like more core strength. He started early intervention at 5 months old. And thank God for that program. I mean, really those programs are meant to support the work you're doing at home, one-on-one with your child. But, if you're like a single parent and you're working all the time, reality is it can be difficult to be there. You can't be there 24/7, right?
Right.
You
The
just,
world's not designed for
no,
that.
it is
The
not.
world will leave you behind, and that's unfortunate.
It will. Absolutely. All the more reason to advocate and to just really push those skills, right?
Yeah.
So, he's right now, I can't wait till you meet him, honestly, both of them. You're going to love them. But you'll notice that, he's socially younger than he is. But he's the
Both of
happiest
your
child.
children or the
Both,
5
but
years
the
old?
5-year-old, the younger one, he's the one with the global delays. And in some ways he's catching up really well. Like the speech and language has come a long way. But for a while I just was thinking like, is he ever going to be normal? I hate that word.
Yeah.
I really do. But it's just a word society uses.
Maybe not normal, but functional in society.
I would have been happy for that.
Because
But
if you think about it, you can be not, quote, normal and
Yeah.
function in society.
you
if
can be
you find-
unique and different,
exactly.
which the world celebrates.
Exactly.
But it's funny because there's kind of this line, right? You can be unique and different, but only to this point. And then we
Right.
think you're
Once
a
people
little...
start noticing.
Yes.
And I believe, here's another quick funny moment from Tyler's dad joke library, maybe. I firmly believe if we had superheroes in real life, we would bully them to the point where we no longer had superheroes because they're different. And we don't like different.
We don't. We try to tell, kids growing up, oh, be yourself, be different, be unique.
As long as you fit
in
XYZ.
this box. And many people with disabilities just do not fit in a box. They don't even fully fit in the box of their diagnosis.
Yeah.
Right? Because nobody's a cookie cutter diagnosis. So I think one of the things for me, getting over any feelings of shame, and then you feel shame saying, I had feelings of shame.
Right.
Right?
Because, again, we don't like to talk about our emotions.
Oh, I'm fine with that. I'm a social worker. I do that all day long.
Society.
Society doesn't.
Yeah.
You're right. But yeah, I mean, you feel like, oh my gosh, what a bad parent am I that I have these actual feelings of shame from the stigma of my child's differability, differently abled, right? So you have to admit that. You have to come to a place where you're like, this is how I feel. This is how I really feel about this. Now, how do I get through this? And everybody copes in a different way. For me, it was my faith and the support of my family and friends. But really, at the core, why is it? Why is it that I feel there's something wrong with my child? Because society's telling me that. Sure, there are limitations. You can obviously tell that some things are delayed or behind or a little different. Why is that bad? Especially if they're able to really function.
Right.
Why is that bad?
Yeah.
It's not. They're not broken. They're just different. It's like having, I think of disabilities as like a rainbow, right? We have the typical colors of the rainbow that we see, But what if a disability is just a different color of the rainbow? And it's beautiful in its own right. And when
Yeah.
you add that
That
to the
is
rainbow, it
awesome.
enhances it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I think of my children. And that's how I think of their peers in class. And that's how I think of disabilities in general, because it is. There is
Yeah.
beauty. There is beauty in what people think is broken.
Hey guys, we need to tell you about our sponsor, Cardinal Artworks.
That's right. Cardinal Artworks is our exclusive provider of really great merchandise.
They have cutting boards, t-shirts, cups, you name it.
That's right. Scott and Christina over at Cardinal Artworks are amazing. They're also the exclusive provider of all of the merchandise for the Dionna and A Stroke of Luck brand. So make sure you check them out. We're going to have a link in the podcast description below.
Enjoyed the show. Is your kids like going to class? How many kids in the class?
Oh, is it a reduced class?
Oh, so my older son is in general education.
Okay.
And I love our school district because they're not super huge classes. I think he's got like 15 kids in his class or something like that.
Okay.
Right now it's fluctuating a little bit right now.
Yeah.
My younger son's in a 12-1-1.
Okay.
So 12 students with disabilities, one teacher, one aide. And actually he has 2 aides, which is really nice because a lot of school districts don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
But now, actually, as of a couple of days ago, I had his CSE meeting, and they're saying he's grown so much that we have to really look. We have to really look at where does he belong next school year, and it's exciting.
Possibly regular classes.
Possibly with a lot of supports. So we have to, kind of the next couple months are going to be really intensely looking at him. He's going to actually have some gen ed classes, and the aides are going to go and they're going to step back and say, let's see how much he can actually do on his own.
Right.
I have some reservations as a mama bear. I
Right.
do. But honestly,
Mama
How
bear.
proud are you that they're even considering that? You're like, he's succeeding.
I'm so proud of him. And that's what everybody's saying. We're so proud of him. Everybody's just like, look how far he's come, in even the past couple months.
Yeah.
I think he's starting to pick up a little too, and he's proud of himself.
Aw.
That is so
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. So like, for example, like potty training was very late for him because he really struggled to understand the concept. And sure, it's hard for any kid, and let's face it, boys take longer anyways. But, he's very proud that he can now do that. Boys do take longer. I'm sorry.
Well, unless it's Luna.
Oh my gosh. My dog. Man.
We'll leave it at that.
She is 1.5 years right now and still pee in the house.
I just love her.
So guys, except
Yep.
for Luna. But
Wait a second. Okay, you mean guys plus Luna.
plus
I was
Luna.
like, is Luna a guy? No, I think you're saying she's a girl. Anyways, so we're all very proud of him. And at the same time, like, my mama bear-ness is like, well, hold on. You're not going to just drop him, are
Right.
you? You're not just going to stick him in a gen ed class and say, bye, good luck, because that ain't going to work.
Oh,
Let's be
definitely.
real
Right.
about what those supports and services look like. Just because he can be doing great academically doesn't mean everything else is fine and dandy.
Right.
You should consider having a note taker, like 1-on-1.
For my little guys?
Yeah. Well, your 5-year-old
Yeah.
next year.
He is. I have to think outside the box a little with some of these
Mhm.
things because I never would have thought of that.
Yeah. Do you have services for any of your kids through either Access VR or Heritage?
No.
So they have provided a lot of what Deanna's talking about. So and I always get it wrong, so it's probably whatever I say, it's probably going to be the opposite service. Her note taker's paid through Access VR.
No.
I told you. So
Tell us.
Heritage pays through her for her
Yes.
note taker.
Right now, but before, like, college, in high school, the first couple of months having a regular note taker with me
Mm-hmm.
after my stroke. And
Was that done through the school district?
correct. And my mom asked for a different note taker, like a kind of a not good note taker, but like, here's my notes before my stroke. And that is not the same notes now with my note taker prior.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom asked for that. And a woman was at BOCES and having BOCES came every day
Wow.
for me to have her notes to me.
That's nice.
And yeah. And after that, going into college, I had Heritage Christian Services pay for my note taker.
Nice.
Yeah.
So tie it back in. See, can you do it?
No.
All right. So Heritage and Access VR are basically brokers for state programs.
Yes.
So those would be options. But I was thinking while Deanna was talking, how would a note taker benefit your kids? And my thought was, and it would entirely depend on their needs, but potentially, do they learn better if they're all in on absorbing the information and then somebody else could memorialize the information for them? But on the other hand, like Eric, my brother, his way of learning, he had to memorialize the information. So a note taker wouldn't have worked for him because if he didn't put it on paper, it might as well not have been learned in the first place. So
I think when my younger son is older, I mean, there's a lot of time. There's a lot that could change, right? But I could he's kind of all over the map. He's so happy and so active. Like I could kind of see like, oh, that might ground him a little. Here are the main points. My older son, though, you're talking about a lot of that pragmatic language, right? So you could have him read a paragraph and you could ask him, what did that mean? What was that about?
I don't know.
I don't know. But he really is like, because there's something about some part of his brain that is not processing highlights, right?
So is he quantitative, not qualitative? Meaning he knows the information, but he can't tell you what the information means?
Right. How did that character feel? He might come up with the wrong emotion.
Right.
Right?
Like cognitively.
Yeah.
Your Italian's showing. Will you beat the crap out of your mic again?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm doing it too.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, it's content, right? So
Yeah.
like his reading comprehension is one thing that could use some work. Has come a long way. I want to celebrate that. I don't want to, minimize the work and the progress, but a note taker in that sense, I'm not sure, because
reading aloud too.
Reading aloud, having someone read to him, that auditory, and even then sometimes it's tough because it's like, he could probably recite what you just read to him. But if you ask him for who was the main character, yeah, he could probably come up with that. But what's the main point of this story? What's the moral of the story? I don't know. And he's so smart. And it's just so fascinating, though, like what parts of the brain he's using and what parts he's not. Because how can you know every single flag of the world like he does? He knows every flag of the world. And things like that interest him. Oh my gosh. He knows he's also into what's that?
And your son is 5.
Oh, that's my 8-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
She's got 2.
I have 2.
I know.
That's why I have these dark circles under my eyes. My glasses are hiding. Yeah, no, I have 2 boys. Um, yeah, so he's got like these extreme interests of like he can know all the flags of the world. He can know he's really into this one I never even knew was a thing, but every country has an emergency alert system, right? You
Mhm.
hear like the tone on the TV, this is just a test of
Yeah.
blah 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 blah. Well, America's is different than Canada's, is different than Great Britain's, is different than Ireland's. And he can hear the sound and he can tell you which countries it is and he will be right. And then he'll pair it to which flag it goes to.
Hmm.
But then you read
Wow.
him a paragraph and ask him what was the main concept in that. I don't know. It's just fascinating
Yeah.
how the brain works.
And that, go ahead.
Just 911. That is United States, like 911.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
it's different in every country.
exactly.
But different. Canada is something
Oh, no, I
else.
don't live
I
there.
don't
Now I'm curious
really
what
know.
it is.
But yeah, and you're talking, and it reminds me so much of my brother Eric.
Oh, yeah?
And because he was the same way, he really struggled in school because if it wasn't an interest to him, it wasn't that he couldn't do it. It's that his brain was other places, and my mom really worried about him, and it turns out he's doing fine. Of course, he was very mild, but
Mm-hmm.
when you're younger, it seems to be in his case, it was a lot worse. There were times where I can remember you were like, holy crap, like all this kid wants to do is learn about baseball this year. And if it wasn't baseball, it did not exist.
I see that too. And I
Yeah.
think I think that we don't even realize as we grow and move through the school system, how much of our learning is actually socially motivated,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
right? So we realize we have to learn about things that we're not interested in, right?
Oh yeah, 90%
Because-
of what I learned in school I could care less about.
Exactly. When do I
Yeah,
ever use
yeah.
a parallelogram? Like,
Yeah.
No.
what?
No.
No, exactly.
And we're trying to give everybody everything
Yeah.
instead of what they need.
Mhm.
But there's a part of maybe more neurotypical
Mhm.
students, and I don't want to sound stereotypical, but this is my perspective. There's a part of more neurotypical students who will say, I want my teacher to be happy with me, or I want to do what's expected. I want to follow the norms. I
Mhm.
want to whatever. And there's a huge social motivation there. But if you are, for example, you have ASD, and maybe in your circumstance, that social motivation piece is
It's
just
not
not
there.
there.
Yeah.
You don't pick up on the fact that, like, like there's certain social things you're doing that your peers are like, what? And maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That kind of you're a little shielded from
Oh.
the
And
opinions of others.
that's why when we're around Eric and when he doesn't stop talking, remember when him and Dakota got into an argument?
Yep.
And
Always
Eric
right.
Eric was like, it was on cranberry sauce. Eric thought that
Mm.
his cranberry sauce was the bee's knees.
Hmm.
And that's all he cared about. And he just couldn't pick up on the social cue that the rest of us didn't like it, and that's okay. But
Mhm.
we don't need to stick on this topic.
Mhm.
And then my other brother likes to antagonize him and do the brother thing. And so they go back and forth, but he
Bicker.
he doesn't
Brothers.
pick up on the social cues.
Yeah, exactly.
And he graduated high school in 2021.
I don't know. No.
It's your brother.
My brother, they graduated college.
Oh, did I say high school?
It's all right.
I'm so sorry. Sorry, Eric.
Yeah, no, he's
College. Sorry, sorry.
all three of my younger brothers actually now make more money than I do, so worked
Yep.
out for the best for them.
I'm a social worker. Never mind. Money will never be part of the picture. I've just
Yeah.
come to accept that. All for the cause.
Mm-hmm.
So we've
Anyway.
been talking for probably about a half hour, 40 minutes or so. So we'll close out the show, but
Mhm.
do you have any final comments or anything that you want to, talk about before we end it?
That's a big question. I guess
It's meant to be open-ended.
Yes. Well, first of all, just thank you for having me. I could go on forever and ever and ever on
Yeah.
this topic.
Well, and
'cause
that's
it's
the
near and
good
dear to
thing
my
is
heart.
you're more than welcome to come back and talk
Exactly.
on the topic
Sweet.
whenever you want. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
I may take you up on it. I guess just a final thought for me is really, at least what's been on my heart the last couple
Mhm.
years is inclusion, right?
Mm.
And you think small scale about your own kids' lives or your own loved one's life, and how do we make them feel included? How do we educate people about differences? But then I have to go there a little more, macro
Mm-hmm.
scale because it's the social worker in me.
Yeah.
How do you educate society on the fact that different is okay? And
Right.
maybe that takes decades, maybe that takes a lifetime, but that's what I would really like to see.
And to
Wow.
to
Yeah.
piggyback off of um your thought, how do we take that into the workforce to allow people with different abilities
Mhm.
to further their independence?
And it's not just accommodations, right?
No, exactly. It needs to be more.
It's the intangibles,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can give this person a modified equipment of some sort. You can give people, I don't know, whatever it is that they really need to be able to be successful in the workforce. But what are the intangibles? How about having coworkers who make them feel included,
Mm-hmm.
right? How about getting together with people outside of work? Everybody, not just the neurotypical
Yeah.
people, or
Some
right.
people, not
Because
all.
exactly, and those are the things that are really going to
Yeah.
make the difference.
And there's a
Mhm.
lot of hard, immovable rules in the corporate world where you work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week,
Mhm.
and somebody with a disability, a differability may not be able to do that. They might only be able to
Mhm.
put in 4 hours a day.
Mhm.
So that acceptance that that's them, and we should mold ourselves around them. The company is arguably much more flexible
Mhm.
than a person. So if you're like, we expect you to work 8 hours a day in the grind, well, you're not going to get that productivity. That's not inclusive.
I don't know that I can even be that productive in you get burnt out. But you're
Yeah.
right. And the
Mhm.
heart, I think of that is they have something to bring to the table,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
right? And if you can just, in an ideal world, everybody would be able to have something tailored so they can operate at their
Yeah.
best.
Mhm.
But I think what we sometimes forget, and I love where you're going with this, is that people with differability, who are differently abled, not neurotypical, all of these terms, have something to bring. And how do we draw that out of them? How do we set
Yeah.
up a workforce or a system or a society that draws out the good?
And if we can unlock that answer to that question, we can unlock what they have to offer.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. And then it's not us and them, right? It's
It's us.
us. And that's the goal.
And
That
I can't
is
think of a better place to close out the episode than
yeah.
that. Well, thank you so
Wow.
much for joining
Thank
us
you.
today.
This has been fun. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I can't wait for you to see the final video.
Oh, I
And
don't know if I can watch it, but thank you.
well, you might be able to listen to it.
I'll probably listen.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
You want to close out the show, Dee?
Thank you for watching. Bye.